been around for 20 years or more. And this session is about budget cuts and exclusion to human rights. So basically, we're taking a look at the moral economy issues. I did, with the help of a great team, have like 6 minutes of comments put together to introduce this topic. But to be honest with you, all but 2 points that we pulled together have already been covered a couple times in the opening session, so I'm not a fan of redundancy. There are 2 points, though, that we talked about that were not covered, and one is that just that we really are in a different time in terms of the way our government is putting together its budget. You know, even though it was not, people's needs were not being met, at least 20 years ago, when budgets were being put together in Vermont, there was some sort of at least a superficial look at what people's needs were, and then figuring out what was needed, and then they would try to determine how to raise the money to meet those needs. That's all gone to the wayside, and basically the process is, let's see how much money we collected, and then we'll use that to kind of divvy it up to provide supports and services for people in Vermont. So it's been pretty backwards for at least the last 20 or so years. Liz did an excellent job of kind of laying out some of the facts around what life is like for workers in Vermont and the concentration of wealth. There is one little bit of facts that she didn't mention, and that is if we look at our state budget, the amount of money that corporate taxes have been paid has decreased in the last, from 1980 to 2010. Vermont corporate income taxes went from 11.5% of the general fund down to 6.5%, which is quite a contrast when we looked at those other statistics and how Liz is pointing out about how that's where during the same amount of time they've garnered up so much more wealth during that time. So I thought I'd throw that little one bit of statistic in there. Yes, I will. So this is from Public Assets website. Thank God for Public Assets. In Vermont, as well as across the country, the taxes paid by corporations have declined. So from the actual fact, from 1980 to 2010, Vermont's corporate income taxes decreased from 11.5% of the revenue that's part of our general fund to 6.5%. And so at the same time, the revenue that's collected from meals, rooms, and sales taxes and other usury taxes has gone from 28% of the budget up to 35% of the budget. So just adding those few facts there. But I am really honored to be able to introduce 6 amazing people who are part of this panel, who are going to share with you not only the impacts that some of these issues and budget issues that we've been talking about so far today have impacted their communities, but also share with you some of the actions that they've taken to kind of stand up to some of this oppression. And we're going to begin with Ellen Schwartz, and she is from Healthcare is a Human Right Campaign.
Great, thanks Topper,
Yes.
and thanks everybody for coming out to this session. As Topper said, my name is Ellen Schwartz. I live in Brattleboro and I'm president of the Vermont Workers Center. And I'm going to share some reflections based on the experiences we've had with the Healthcare is a Human Right campaign, which we launched in 2008 to build a broad-based people's movement and to win universal, publicly financed healthcare in Vermont. So there are a number of things that have changed since 2008. In particular, I'm thinking about Obamacare and the passage of Act 48, but at the end of the day, healthcare is still a huge issue and a source of daily stress for most families in Vermont. This winter, we surveyed people in Brattleboro and other communities about their experiences with the healthcare system, and nearly everyone I spoke with had unmet healthcare needs. For some people, it was that the care they need wasn't covered. For other people, they couldn't find a doctor or dentist who would accept Medicaid. And many others had deductibles and copays that are so high that they just didn't use their insurance. But this isn't just our experience in Brattleboro. As Liz pointed out this morning, between 2004 and 2014, health insurance costs for people in Vermont grew by 70%, while median income shrank by 7%. When combined with double-digit growth in the cost of childcare, rent, education, and other basic needs, that is a huge burden for working families. And in spite of its name, the Affordable Care Act hasn't made things much better. Nationally, the Affordable Care Act means that more people are covered with health insurance, but most people are still stuck with a healthcare system that they can't afford and one that puts corporate profits above the ability of people to get the care that they need when they need it.
Ellen, if you just speak right into the mic with your
Like
mouth.
this?
Try it again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's another piece I want to bring in here. According to the Public Asset Institute, healthcare-related costs are responsible for about a third of the Vermont budget, which is placing significant pressure on programs supporting people in our communities, which is really what Topper was, one of the things she was just referring to. Inevitably, people who are perceived as the least powerful, meaning the least rich and the least politically well-connected, are first in line for cuts. The disability community experiences this year after year, as have recipients of Reach Up, with a special double whammy for Reach Up parents who happen to have a disability. Contrast this for a minute with the $1 million that Vermont handed over to Global Foundries back in January. And keep in mind that these huge healthcare costs aren't focused on our human right to healthcare. A lot of that money is going to people at the top of the healthcare system, like pharmaceutical company CEOs or their hedge fund owners. For example, a new drug for people with cystic fibrosis is projected to increase Medicaid costs by $5 million. We need to question a system where big pharma can amass immense profits while preventing the production of generic alternatives, and meanwhile, the rest of us suffer. So let's talk about Act 48 for a minute. That's the law that we helped pass in 2011 after hundreds of us organized in our communities, spoke out at public hearings, and testified at the State House. The law committing Vermont to a universal, publicly financed healthcare system. That's the good news. But as you probably know, Governor Shumlin was supposed to deliver a financing plan to the legislature, and in the end, after delaying for many years, he decided to torpedo the entire venture. Why did he do that? Shumlin's financing plan was no model of equity and progressive taxation, but it showed that Green Mountain Care would have increased net incomes for 93% of Vermont families. Or to put it another way, 9 out of 10 Vermont families would have seen more money in their pocket at the end of the year. So why did he do it? The answer lies with the people who would have seen their costs rise. In this case, the top 7% of Vermont families, and the power that they, along with the health insurance companies and big business in general, hold over decision-making in Montpelier. And that brings me to my last point, which is about power. By dint of tons of organizing and public pressure, which many of you were involved in, we got Act 48 passed. We stood up to racism by defeating the Brock-Sears Amendment, which would have excluded undocumented immigrants. But ultimately, we didn't have the people power to overcome opposition to public financing, and so we suffered a setback from which we've learned some valuable lessons. The most important lesson is that passing a law isn't enough to be able to win our human rights. We need to build a movement of thousands of people who are organized and in the fight for the long haul. The momentum around Bernie's candidacy is amazing, and we have an opportunity to draw all that energy into the movement we're building. All of this informs our path forward as we continue to organize for the human right to health care. We're committed to healthcare access for all, but we also know that the right to health is more than being able to see a doctor. Toxic water in North Bennington is a health hazard, as are all forms of environmental contamination. Not being able to put food on the table affects the health of the whole family. Prisons increasingly serve as holding tanks for people with mental health needs. The treatment of practitioners at hospitals such as Porter leads to high turnover, never good for patients or practitioners. Dealing with racial, disability, or gender discrimination, or working 2 to 3 jobs with irregular schedules and no benefits, all of these conditions affect our health. So ultimately, we need to ask ourselves, what is the point of our political and economic system? Is it to foster the well-being of the people of Vermont, the health of our communities, and the rights of each one of us to develop our capacities to the fullest? Or is it to eke out a profit for a few at the expense of everyone else, and at the expense of our human dignity? I'm here this weekend to think with all of you about how we can, together, take the next steps in building a movement that can win concrete victories and simultaneously move us closer to a world in which both people and the planet are no longer treated as economic commodities for sale to the highest bidder. Thank you.
So the next speaker, I will.
Am I the next speaker?
Yes, you are. Sorry. So I'm going to introduce Wilda White. She is from Vermont Psychiatric Survivors.
Hello, everyone. How are you?
Who are you?
Hola, ¿qué tal? Like Karen said, my name is Wilda White, and I'm the Executive Director of Vermont Psychiatric Survivors. And we are an independent statewide organization run by and for psychiatric survivors. And psychiatric survivors are people who, some who identify as psychiatric survivors are people who feel like they have survived the abuses of the mental health system. Some people who are psychiatric survivors think of themselves as having survived mental health challenges. I fall in the latter the former category, somebody who has survived the abuses of the mental health system. We, as an organization, we provide advocacy and education and peer support to our members. And I'm new to the organization. I've been there for about 8 months. And my focus has been on trying to get political power for members of my community. And when I say who I count in my community, I'm talking about people who have been psychiatrically labeled, whether or not they might identify as a person who has a mental illness or mental health challenge. I want you all to understand that just because somebody has been psychiatrically labeled does not mean that they have a psychiatric problem. They've just been labeled as such. So I was given a format to actually follow for this presentation, and I was asked to talk about the problem, the root causes, and the solutions. And so I'm going to try to follow that and do it briefly. Much of where I come from is, I've been a member of the racial justice movement, the women's movement, the gay rights movement, and now what I would call the Mad Pride movement. And I came to the Mad Pride movement very late in life, just very recently, in fact. But I have to say that, having been the victim of discrimination based on race, sex, gender, sexuality, that was nothing compared to the discrimination I feel based on having been psychiatrically labeled. And yeah, I would want 10 times more of the race, sex, gender, sexuality discrimination if you could just take away a little bit of the discrimination based on being psychiatrically labeled. But they're all common. It's the same system of oppression that works, but why the repression against people who have been psychiatrically labeled is so oppressive is because of ignorance and silence and disinformation. because we sat in the big room over there and we heard people talk about oppression, but you never heard anybody talk about the oppression of people who have been psychiatrically labeled. So that is a big problem. And the other big problem is that racism is policed through the police, and sex and gender discrimination is policed through the patriarchy, the family in some instances, schools. Sexuality is policed through homophobia, and it used to be through the mental health system. Homosexuality used to be a mental illness, and the same things they give people for, they prescribe the same treatment for homosexuality, electroshock therapy, antipsychotics, institutionalization, that they now give to other people who are psychiatrically labeled, equally ineffective. But the way my community is policed, the ones who are psychiatrically labeled, is through the mental health system, is through police, and also through, unfortunately, all of us, through our fear and scapegoating of my community. And so then, when I've been asked to talk about what the problem is, I would have to say the problem is ignorance. The problem is that the people who have been credited with speaking for my community are the mental health community, which is our source of oppression, right? And they have been very effective in silencing my community by making us feel ashamed of who we are. And they did that with the gay community, and so gay people stayed in the closet until they came out. They silenced black people through Jim Crow, police, prisons, schools, neighborhood segregation. And they do the similar things to our community. So then I've told you what the problem is, and I think I've tried to give you a sense of the root cause. The one thing I haven't mentioned is that our society, I think, oppresses us through this normalism. And what's normal is very narrow and narrowing. And then we all participate in policing what's normal by being afraid of people who stray from this very narrow definition of what's normal. So I think part of the solution then is that we have to change the definition of what's normal. We have to educate ourselves about the abuses of the mental health system. And for my own community, we have to come out. We have to stop allowing this system of oppression to make us feel ashamed about who we are. I think one of the most successful rights movement that I've ever participated in is the gay rights movement. And I can remember when I was a student at UVM back in the mid-'70s, being really afraid of going to a gay student union meeting. I mean, I would sit outside the meeting and watch people go in, and then finally got the courage to go in myself, and then freaked out when I knew people there, as if somehow they were gonna tell, and so, I mean, and now in my lifetime, I came out and I became president of the organization, and I've just seen the power of coming out. And so, for my community, I say we have to come out, and we have to stop being ashamed. And then, so I just want to talk, so because this is about the budget, I want to talk to you about two ways that the oppression of my community was manifested through the most recent budget. One was the governor decided that he wanted to balance the budget on the backs of my community by putting in the budget a provision that would save $5 million. And how was he going to save $5 million? He was going to force drug people who were in the hospital. And he wanted to do it really quick. He wanted to do it in 2 weeks, because he said if we force drug people in 2 weeks, we can get them out of the hospital and we can save $5 million overall. And he did it in the budget, which meant that if the legislature chose to reject this changing the policy about forced drugging, they'd have to come up with $5 million. And so it's easy to do that because we're silenced. And the way we were silenced, we couldn't even get a hearing. They wouldn't even let us go to the committee. They invited doctors and lawyers and judges and the hospital lobby group, but we couldn't even talk. They said, we'll take care of this for you. Now it was ultimately failed, not because it was wrong, but because the committee felt like, hey, we just took up the issue of forced drugging 2 years ago. Why are you doing it to us again now in the budget, right? So that was how that happened. I mean, that's how that oppression manifested itself during the budget cycle. And the governor tried to do the same thing to pregnant women. I don't know if you remember, but he wanted to make it, women who got pregnant, he said would no longer qualify for Medicaid. And it would have, so they would be ineligible for Medicaid. They'd have to sign up through the Vermont Health Connect. But that was like quashed so quickly because people thought, no, we're not going to do that to pregnant women. But the thing with the forced drugging did not get quashed very quickly at all. It was, people think you should force drug people because we think that they scare us. So I probably talked more than my 6 minutes, but thank you for listening.
This is Ebony, and she is the co-founder of the Black Lives Matter movement here in Vermont.
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a franchise?
Well, the co-founder of the movement is a pretty big statement, so I wanted to clarify that. Hi, my name's Ebony Nyoni again, and I also have a business in Winooski and resident of Chittenden County. I've been in Vermont for over 20 years, and I'm here today. I was invited to talk about the problems facing members in my community. And so I'm going to do so. I'm just one black person talking based on what I've seen. I don't represent all black people everywhere, and so I can just tell you, especially having a beauty supply and hair shop, I get to hear the stories of many different kinds of people of color every day. And so the way I'm going to categorize that, because that's big, you can't really compact that into 6 minutes, but I will go through like the demands and what myself and other community members have identified as some like key areas. And again, this is a living document, so it's constantly transforming. And so one of the problems, which many of you already know, is around policing and traffic stops amongst people of color communities. And in Vermont, Chittenden County tends to have more concentrated neighborhoods of people of color. Other areas of Vermont seems to have sprinkles of people of color, but there's definitely a very visible problem going on right now. And everyone from the average local worker to executive to my friend who's an attorney are being pulled over on a regular basis. We want, let's see, so we go through, I'm trying to make a long story short. So there's problems in the schools. A lot of children of color are being targeted because of their hair, because of their skin color, because they're different. They've been suspended, they've been expelled, and total disregard for their future. a lot of the refugee or New American community, which I live in Winooski, so I get to talk to many different kinds of people from all over the world, and who have definitely earned their right to be here, and have been targeted by DCF, big adversary, taking people's children, people with 9 children and babies on their breasts. They're taking them out of their homes consistently, and then placing them into white homes. That's a huge problem in the community right now, in the school system, suspensions and expulsions. In employment, we're seeing that though it's 2016, you can still go into many companies who have 1 or 2 black people, and if they have the black people, they're in very entry-level type positions. Some to mention, Fletcher, UVM Medical Center. They're hiring more people of color and service positions like patient services and those kind of things. Other companies are still hiring people of color, but giving them the glass ceiling, which it used to be a little bit higher and now it's even lower. And so people of color are struggling to be able to support themselves and pay their rent. Rent is going up even in neighborhoods traditionally not looked at as desirable by other people groups, are still, the rent rates are increasing. And so, is this where we go through the problems and then we'll have another round of solutions, or all of it together?
Unfortunately.
In 6 minutes? Okay. Okay, yeah.
Ebony, you're doing great.
So,
Whenever you feel like
okay.
you want to share.
Well, solutions is to jump on board with organizations, social justice organizations, especially Black Lives Matter Vermont. I'm gonna keep it real, which I always do. It's easier for white social justice organizations to get support in Vermont than people of color social justice organizations. I mean, it's easier for organizations run by white people to throw conferences that are pretty well attended, to get support, to get donations. But when it's a people of color organization, it's pretty skimpy. It's pretty hard for us to be empowered and to move forward in our own liberation without having to go under a white organization. And that needs to stop, and people need to realize that we need to be empowered. We need to be in control of our own liberation. And people need to recognize that and start understanding that and asking themselves questions. How can they participate in a way that doesn't continue to perpetuate racism? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ebony. And I just want to add that, you know, most of the afternoon is really going to be spent on talking about solutions with all of us jointly. So it's just fine that you spent most of the time talking about outlining what the issues are. I'm so glad that you suggested your solutions. So Caitlin is going to speak next, and she's from the Vermont State Employee Association.
I can't hear you.
Okay, you know, I would really.
Caitlin's going to speak next, and she's from the Vermont.
From the Vermont what?
Just because of the
Employees
microphone,
Association.
sitting down front will make it easier probably to hear too, so, thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Caitlin Chase. I grew up in Morrisville, Vermont on a farm, so I understand the value and the importance of cultivating and sustaining our resources from our land. I work for the state of Vermont. I have for just over 5 years now. Office of Child Support, Family Services Adoption Clerk, and now I am a long-term care benefits specialist with Economic Services. What that means is folks who need nursing home care, there's long-term care Medicaid for the state to pay for that, as well as if you're in your home and you need nursing services in your home. My caseload also consists of the developmental waiver services as well as TBI cases. So there are about 19 of us throughout the state. Our program is the most expensive state-funded program. On average, per month, it's about $8,000 for nursing home care per person. And there's a very tedious process that I have to go through to find somebody financially eligible. And whether anybody likes it or not, all of us will eventually likely need those services. Because I don't know about you, but I don't have the money to pay $8,000 a month if I find myself in need of nursing home services. So that's what I do for a job. I have 3 small children. I'm a single mom. And that's why I'm here today, because I'm worried about their future as I'm worried about all of our children and grandchildren's future. I'm an officer of the Vermont State Employees Association. You can imagine that state workers, we're a very diverse workforce. We deal with the same struggles that you all are dealing with right in our own union. We have correction workers that don't want us to be involved in Black Lives Matter. We have workers that don't want us to even recognize climate issues. So it's a constant battle just within the union, and it's a battle on the outside too, but we are working in the right direction. So I mentioned that my job, right, for the state of Vermont, finding people eligible to pay for nursing home services. You all know that there's this growing population of people. There's a bubble, right? And the state continues to cut the budget and cut our positions. My caseload is just under 500 now, and I can barely keep up. So what happens is that the nursing homes aren't getting paid in a timely manner. Some nursing homes now won't even accept a person until they have Medicaid in place, which means that they're not getting the services that they need. It's the same with somebody in a home. If they don't have Medicaid in place, Lamoille Home Health, which is where I work, or any home health agency, Council on Aging, they can't even come in to provide those services until Medicaid is in place. We were just recently moved under the Department of Vermont Health Access and out of economic services. What that means is that I'm no longer processing 3 Squares Vermont or seasonal fuel for my caseload. It's all being broken apart. But what that actually does is it pulls the Medicaid funding source out of the economic services budget, which means that people, those positions that are processing seasonal fuel in 3 Squares Vermont, there's not going to be as much funding for them anymore, and I'm afraid as to what's going to happen. That's very scary for all of us. As a single mom of 3, state worker, I receive those services too. I'm just like everybody else. There's no, state workers are in the same boat as everybody else. I pay taxes. I have a vested interest in what happens in our community. So this problem is among ESD, public safety, all of AHS, which is the Agency of Human Services, family services. We're understaffed, and our direction comes from people that don't have the same interests that we have. I just looked at a merit bonus sheet that came out from our president, the president of the Vermont State Employees Association, last night, and I was scrolling through the pages and pages of names, and all of these bonuses were issued to the commissioners and deputy commissioners and attorneys. But nobody like me, which, that's a problem. You're going to cut programs and services, but yet give money to the top-ranking officials. Everybody in here probably heard about my sister, Lara Sabel, who was murdered in August of last year. She was just trying to do her job and protect children, protect a child from a very unsafe position. We spoke up and we came out in droves to try to recognize the issue and share our thoughts about what we could do to fix the issue. And today, nothing has been done to address or change these systemic issues, nothing. We get weekly threats on our life throughout the state. This is a consequence of the economic crisis and ongoing deep budget cuts. Anger continues to build. State workers are the front line, and we receive that anger, but we, like I said, we don't have any stake in the decision-making process. And the administration continues to privatize and outsource jobs. They just successfully managed to cut our risk management division, which is you all probably know, workers' comp. Somebody gets hurt, those are the people that you go to make sure that you have a transition to be able to survive. Those jobs will now be outsourced, and they won't know anything about you or the state. Just last year, 2 public safety answering points, you know as 911, they were both closed, and all of those jobs were cut. Those people in those areas, if you call 911 in an emergency, you're speaking to somebody out of state, doesn't know who you are, doesn't know the road system. This leads to another layer of the public being afraid. The power holders, the legislature, the administration, commissioners, they all answer to big businesses. They have state contracts with Global Foundries, Blue Cross Blue Shield, or even Staples, which has been attempting to privatize the United States Postal Service for a couple of years now. Folks living in poverty, people who aren't engaged or unaware of what's going on, these are the people without the power. We need to be organized. We need the people who receive the services and the community providers, as well as the state workers, to all come together as one community. We need to stand up for our common interests, which is to tax the wealthy elite so that everybody can have what they need to survive. We need a just and equitable system, a system in which everyone will be able to meet their basic needs. It doesn't really matter who gets elected. What we need is our own power to hold decision makers accountable and actually transform the system so that we aren't all fighting over our resources. Together, as one beautifully diverse population of humans, we can do this.
Now we're going to hear from Lorenzo Alcudia. And Abel, I'm so sorry, Abel, are you translating or you also are speaking too? Okay, and excuse me, and also Abel Luna from Migrant Justice. Thank you.
Hola, ¿cómo están? Mi nombre es Lorenzo Alcudia.
Hello everyone, my name is, I will be translating, by the way, it's be consecutive translation, not simultaneous, so we don't interrupt. So we'll be working it out as we go along here. Entonces Lorenzo, ¿ok?
Mi nombre es Lorenzo Alcudia, soy de Tabasco, México.
My name is Lorenzo Alcudia, and I am from Tabasco, Mexico.
Soy un trabajador migrante aquí en Vermont. Trabajo en lechería y apoyo a mi organización Justicia Inmigrante. Soy miembro del COCO de Justicia Inmigrante.
I'm a migrant farm worker, and I work here in Vermont, and I'm also a member of the organization Migrant Justice.
Soy uno de los líderes del Comité de Coordinación de Justicia Inmigrante, en el cual hoy, como trabajador migrante aquí, nosotros lo estamos presentándolo a una como problema como discriminación.
I am a member of the Coordinating Committee for Migrant Justice, one of the leaders, and we are now facing some issues of discrimination.
En el cual tuve un problema el 2015, 14 de febrero de 2015, viajaba hacia una junta, en el cual me paró la policía, iba como copiloto.
Personally, I had a problem that happened to me when I was traveling. In 2015, I was traveling to a meeting I was stopped by policemen. The car was stopped. I was not driving. I was co-pilot, passenger.
El cual el policía se enfocó más en mí que en el chofer, el cual me pidió estatuto migratorio.
So the policeman, instead of paid more attention to me as a passenger than to the driver who was driving, who was stopped actually, and asked me for my identification, documentation.
El cual él tardó por mucho tiempo ahí, el cual habló a inmigración.
He held us for quite a long time there and called immigration.
Hoy en día estamos luchando, trabajando para eso. Hemos igual ganado una ley con no polimigra.
And nowadays we're working against that kind of stopping people, and we initiated a law called polimigra.
En el cual pues ellos no la han respetado y han violado esa ley. Entonces nosotros seguimos trabajando duro para que eso no siga pasando, como lo que ha pasado ahorita con nuestro compañero Víctor Díaz.
But the police have not stopped doing what they were doing. They're not followed the law that was initiated, and they still are stopping people. The most recent one, which was they seized our compañero, our friend,
Víctor Díaz, que él está detenido con migración, y en el cual pues estamos trabajando que sea liberado.
So Victor Diaz was seized, and he is now being held by immigration, and we are working to get him freed.
So we got to hear from Lorenzo some of the discrimination that our community faces, and this is something that we face every day when people are out driving, when people are out on the store, when people are catching their checks, when people are buying their food. This is what we are facing. This is some of the problems that our community face, and some of the root issues, the root causes. Lorenzo's case. It's just an example of the growing trend and collaboration between local police and immigration, and that's what we call polimigra, for police and migra for immigration collaboration. And so just in these few years, more than 400,000 people, close to 500,000 people, have been deported. More than 2.5 million people have been deported under the Obama administration, greater than any other time in U.S. history. And this is only possible because every police officer, every cop in the country is being deputized as an immigration officer, immigration agent. They're given the powers to act as immigration agents. And so polimigra really combines two strands of criminalization present throughout U.S. history. The police, formed out of slave patrols created to capture runaway slaves, have always existed to criminalize and control people of color and protect the rich. And the other one is exclusionary immigration policies that exist to protect white power, structures that hold this power together. The U.S. government has built borders in order to maintain political control of the settlers, the colonial class, and to ensure a steady stream of highly exploitable workers. And this issue is not, immigration is not going to stop because we continue to see big companies that are privatizing land, not just in Mexico, but other parts of the world. So this is going to continue to happen.
Como les mencionaba entonces anteriormente, hoy lo presentamos este problema de la discriminación. Entonces es uno de los tantos problemas que estamos hoy en día luchando para que nosotros seamos como nuestros valores sean respetados y tratados como personas y sean como cualquier persona de aquí del estado.
As I said before, we're struggling against this discrimination. Another aspect of the discrimination is that we're also fighting that our values be valued, that be respected, and that we be treated as parts of the communities and respected as members of the community.
Nosotros aquí como trabajadores migrantes hemos llegado aquí hemos emigrado porque en nuestro país, que es México, estado de Tabasco, hay grandes empresas que han explotado las tierras en cuales ellas han dejado de producir lo que es la industria, la agricultura.
We are here as migrants from Mexico because in our country, in Mexico, and he's from Tabasco, the great corporations, the big corporations have exploited the land and the use of land and agriculture and have deprived us of that resource, and therefore we have had to migrate.
Eso ha bajado la economía a nuestro estado, en el cual nosotros nos sentimos obligados a migrar para mejorar nuestra vida económicamente, igual como para darle una educación a nuestros hijos.
So because of that, that has affected the economy, obviously our economy, the people's economy, and has forced us to migrate from our homes in order for us to be able to provide for our families and to educate our children.
En el cual nosotros venimos aquí a este país a trabajar, solo a trabajar, el cual nos gustaría que nos sintiéramos igual tratados como cualquier persona, no ser discriminado ni por nuestro color, raza, el cual igual cuando me detuvo la policía presenté mi caso con derechos humanos, el cual fue exitoso, me escucharon y el cual el problema las preguntas que él me hizo fue tratado como discriminación, racismo contra mí.
So we have come here as migrants to work, and we want to be respected for the work that we do. We do not want to face this kind of discrimination, and we want to be treated like everyone else. In my case, we presented my case to human rights organization, and they listened to us, and they supported our human rights.
Yeah, that was the Human Rights Council that Lorenzo was referring to. Human Rights Commission, the council. So we mentioned what are some of the issues that our communities are facing, and so what are the solutions to these problems? Migrant justice, we're fighting back against this criminalization in all fronts. We're fighting to free farm worker leader Victor Diaz, who is now being detained in New Hampshire. We also, in 2014, we focused on the Bias-Free Policing Policy Act 193, Bias-Free Policing Policy, or Fair and Impartial Policing, to make sure that the collaboration between Border Patrol and local police didn't continue. And as Lorenzo has shared, we also have made the Human Rights Commission, we have given them work and homework to make sure that these agencies are also holding these law enforcement agencies accountable to human rights violations. And one of the challenges that we're facing as a community is the false division of good and bad immigrants, deserving and the undeserving immigrants or members. As a movement, we reject this division. We oppose the criminalization of immigrants and all deportations. And so if we can all, at the same time, scream out, not one more deportation, not one more, not one more, not one more.
And the last speaker is Piper Carter. You heard her get us all riled up this morning, and she's from Grassroots Global Justice Alliance.
I know our time is short, but could we just honor, I'm an empath, so I feel like a lot, so I feel like I gotta cry right quick. Can we just honor, there's a lot of pain. Do you guys feel I felt your pain, I feel your pain. That's fucked up. That you gotta, I'm sorry. You know what I'm saying? That's fucked up. You're trying to help people. And like, that shit's not your shit. And you don't even have to hold on. That's a whole bunch of bullshit that you're being asked to hold on to. And you too. You know, like we're asked to like hold all this stuff. And like, none of this stuff is ours. It's like white supremacy, capitalism, like that's their bullshit. And they're trying to make us like hold on to all this bullshit. It's not ours. I just had to like say that right quick. Because I feel like everyone's pain, and it's painful, you know, to have to negotiate like all this stuff. So I just wanted to like honor that and thank everyone, you know, just honor that everyone is working really hard, you know? And it's a lot of work. It's hard work. And, but we're not alone. Like, it's a lot of us here who came here to see some justice. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just have to like say that, because sometimes we're walking around and we want to be here and like say some smart shit. And like, I want to sound smart, but like, damn, man. Like, we got to reclaim our humanity. Okay, so I'll start with like some solutions. Like, we've been working in Detroit on a lot of solutions, and like the genocide has come down with the hammer like real hard on us, all of us, but in Detroit we get to really see it. Water, you know, has really been our biggest struggle, and we too had one of our comrades, Charity Hicks from East Michigan Environmental Action Council, which is the organization that has brought me here as a part of GGJ. And she was murdered. Attempt on her life, May 2014, when she was our policy director. And she was actually taking the Flint issue and the Detroit issue to the UN to have it declared a human rights violation. They say that it was a car accident, but it was no accident that the guy that hit her was the son of a policeman. Just gotta let you guys know that, because if you ever look up the story, they'll say it was a car accident. It was no accident. She was bringing the Flint issue to the UN when she was hit. I'm just saying that because there's a lot of struggles and things that we're talking about, and all of these are interconnected, right? All of these are interconnected. And so the reason that I want to tell you about all of our movements is because this is how we got to move, right? We got to move outside. We got to color outside the lines, and we have to honor that. That's how we got to move. We got to color outside these lines. So one thing that I'm involved in is something called the Digital Justice Coalition. And what we did, we were able to get like $2 million from Obama, like back in 2009, and we created 13 free computer centers because we believe that technology is a human right, because people have to have access to technology, right? Nowadays, they moved all that stuff onto the internet. And a lot of our communities not on the internet. They're not. People think that youth, like that's the rhetoric, right? Like the narrative is that all the youth are so technologically savvy. Not in the hood, because we don't have computers. And people don't have access to technology. So that's one thing we did. So look that up, Detroit Digital Justice Coalition. I'm gonna give you a lot of stuff to look up because I only got like 3 minutes left. There's an organization called Detroit Black Community Food Security Network in Detroit that's food sovereignty, food security, food justice. And so one thing that's going on is there's a food co-op that we're raising money. We used to have a food co-op, but now we're raising money to have a food co-op because in Detroit, we suffer from what's called a food desert. And so we don't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. They impose the Whole Foods on us. But nobody can afford, who can afford whole paycheck? I mean, come on now. Nobody can afford that. And it's not even like real organic. Come on now, Monsanto's all up and through there. But it's the truth, I'm sorry, but it's the truth. And in our grocery stores, you know, we don't even have grocery stores in Detroit. People gotta get an orange from the gas station. Like, you know, so Detroit Detroit Black Foods Security Community Food Security Network has a farm called D-Town Farms, locally grown, organic, non-GMO, no pesticides, working to employ people livable wages, right? Because that's really important, and teaching people about how to farm. Because in the hood, like I got my friends asking me crazy questions like, really, you can eat an apple off that tree that's in my front yard? Like, yeah, we don't even know stuff like that. It's true. Because the only apple that people have ever seen comes in a bag and it's already cut up. Yeah, okay. So there's another organization called We the People of Detroit. I'll tell you about what they're doing. They're the ones who help bring the water struggle to the national forefront and the international forefront as well. And they got a lot of great campaigns going on. They got the EPA compendium on water customer assistance programs. And so one of the main things in Detroit, like Flint's issue is poison water, and Detroit's issue is no water. And so massive 100,000 person water shutoffs. That's like, and cross that over with the 50,000 to 80,000 tax foreclosed homes, right? And then you cross that over with the hundreds of schools that have been closed so that privatized corporations can create education that's funded by the Corrections Authority of America. Anyway, Bill Gates and all these people that have stakes in creating technology. My time is up? Okay. So I'll just name two other quick things. We have what's called New Work, New Culture, and that we're doing maker spaces so that we can create our own jobs and our own economy, because there's no more jobs, right? People are going to school, they're paying money for education, but there's no jobs. So we have to create our own work and reimagine what is work. And then another thing that we're doing is mobilizing one another around resisting against the militarization and criminalization that's happening in our communities, so that we reimagine what safety is, right? Because as we're being told that safety is more police, like we know that's like, sounds crazy, right? Safety is one-to-one, get to know each other, reinvest in our communities, reinvest in one another as human beings, and that's how we create safety, right, in our communities, by making them more human. So just write those couple of ones down, as well as East Michigan Environmental Action Council. All right, so if you write that stuff down, get at me, Piper Carter. Let's work together, right? Because working together doesn't mean like that we get the grant together, although it could mean that. It means that we like know each other's names and we actually connect with one another and we actually have these real conversations and get real with one another and support each other. Is that cool? Yeah. Okay, love you guys.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. It is, just think of all the time you're going to have this afternoon to speak up and share your thoughts. So Kate is going to be at the door when you leave, and she's going to give you a card, because I'm assuming, Kate, we need to move on.
Yeah, lunch is probably ready for us
Okay.
now. Could I
So-
say something right quick? Just 1 minute,
Sure.
please.
I appreciate what you said and taking the time, because a lot of times we rush through really serious things, like what all of us were saying, like this is the reality, this is our life. And I didn't get a chance to go through the budget piece. There is no budget for Black people in Vermont to cut. So there's nothing there. Any kind of monies that's ever given is given to white people to decide where the few crumbs or coins go. There is nothing. And I know it's going against the grain to mention anything about Bernie or anything, but I don't feel him, I don't see him, I haven't experienced him. I know he's hugging Black Lives Matter people folks all over the country, but he's not hugging me. And so I know that goes against the grain, but I'm gonna put that out there. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Evelyn. There are two small things. If you have a child, you need to go pick them up and bring them to lunch with you. And then on the way out, you'll get a card, and that will tell you what discussion group you're going to be in this afternoon. And that's where you'll get to speak to your